The frozen ground felt like iron beneath Friedrich Muller's body. He pressed himself deeper into the foxhole, trying to become invisible. His breath came out in white clouds that could give away his position to the Americans searching through the Ardennes forest. It was December 1944, and the German offensive that Hitler called Operation Watch on the Rhine had failed. Everyone knew it, even if no one dared to say it out loud. Friedrich was 22 years old, but he felt ancient. The boy who had left Hamburg 3 years ago no longer existed. That boy had believed in victory and glory. That boy had never seen his best friend's blood freeze on snow. Hans Weber lay beside him in the foxhole, shivering. They had been friends since training camp, and now they would probably die together in this Belgian forest. Hans was from Berlin, a city that British bombers had turned into rubble. His family's apartment building was gone. His father was dead. His mother and little sister lived in a basement somewhere, if they still lived at all. "Do you remember real food?" Hans whispered. His lips were blue from cold. Friedrich closed his eyes. He remembered his mother's kitchen, the smell of fresh bread on Sunday mornings. Real butter, not the ersatz garbage they had eaten for the past 2 years. Potato soup with actual meat in it. His girlfriend Maria making apple cake for his birthday. That was 1941, before everything went wrong. "Stop talking about food," Friedrich said. They had not eaten in 3 days. Their unit's supply line had been cut off during the American counterattack. Yesterday they ate tree bark. Today they ate nothing but snow. The sound of boots crunching through ice made them both freeze. American voices carried through the cold air. Friedrich could not understand English, but he knew the tone. The hunters were close to their prey. "We have no ammunition left," Hans said. It was not a question. They both knew. Friedrich checked his rifle one more time, hoping for a miracle. The magazine was empty. He had 2 grenades, but they were frozen solid and might not work. Even if they worked, what then? Kill 2 Americans and get killed by 20 more. The war was lost. Everyone knew it. Even the officers who still screamed about fighting to the last man. The Americans and British were pushing from the west. The Russians were crushing everything in the east. Germany was being squeezed like a tube of toothpaste, and soon nothing would be left. "My sister loved sweets," Hans said suddenly. "Before the war, I would save my pfennigs and buy her chocolate on her birthday. She would eat it so slowly, trying to make it last for days." Friedrich knew why Hans was talking about his sister. It was easier than thinking about the next few minutes. The American voices were getting louder. "Hands up! Come out!" someone shouted in broken German. This was it. The moment Friedrich had feared for 3 years. He thought of the propaganda films they showed in training camp. Americans were monsters who tortured prisoners. Americans were Jewish-controlled beasts who showed no mercy. But Friedrich had also heard other stories, whispered stories from soldiers who had fought in North Africa or Italy. Stories that said Americans treated prisoners well, fed them, followed the rules of the Geneva Convention. "I don't want to die in this hole," Hans said. His voice was steady now, decided. Friedrich looked at his best friend. Hans's face was gray with cold and hunger. His uniform was torn. His hands shook, but his eyes were clear. "Neither do I," Friedrich said. They stood up slowly, hands reaching for the sky. Friedrich expected bullets. Instead, he saw 5 American soldiers pointing rifles at them. The Americans looked young, maybe younger than Friedrich. They looked cold and tired, just like every soldier in every army. An American sergeant walked forward. He was short and stocky, with a face that reminded Friedrich of a farmer. The sergeant said something in English, then tried again in terrible German. "You safe now. Prisoner. No shoot." Another American soldier, barely 18 years old by the look of him, offered Friedrich a cigarette. Friedrich took it with shaking hands. He had not smoked American tobacco before. It tasted strange, but wonderful that a third soldier threw a wool blanket around Hans's shoulders. Hans stared at the blanket like it was made of gold. In the German army, blankets were rare. Kindness was rarer. They walked through the forest with their hands on their heads. Other German prisoners joined them, a sad parade of defeated men. Some were wounded, leaving blood trails in the snow. Some cried. Some walked like ghosts, seeing nothing. Friedrich looked back once at the foxhole that had almost become his grave. The forest was full of such holes now, full of frozen bodies and broken equipment. The Battle of the Bulge, the Americans would call it later. Germany's last big attack in the West, and it had failed completely. Trucks waited at a clearing in the forest. American medics moved among the wounded Germans, treating injuries, offering water. Friedrich watched in confusion. Where was the torture? Where was the brutality? They loaded into the trucks like cattle, packed tight for warmth. The engines started, and they began moving away from the front lines. Hans sat pressed against Friedrich, both of them silent. What happens now? Hans finally asked. Friedrich did not know. Prison camp, certainly. But what kind of prison? Would they starve? Would they freeze? Would they ever see Germany again? Through the truck's canvas opening, Friedrich watched the Belgian countryside roll past. He saw farmhouses with smoke coming from chimneys. He saw a woman hanging laundry. Normal life, continuing while the world burned. The war was not over yet, but for Friedrich Müller and Hans Weber, the fighting was done. They were prisoners now, heading into an unknown future. Friedrich thought about his mother's kitchen one more time, then forced the memory away. Memory was dangerous when you did not know if you would survive to make new ones. The truck drove on through the winter afternoon, carrying its cargo of defeated men toward whatever came next. The processing center smelled like disinfectant and wet wool. Friedrich stood in line with 200 other German prisoners, waiting to be documented. American soldiers with clipboards moved down the rows, asking questions in broken German, taking names and ranks, checking for SS tattoos that would mean a different kind of imprisonment. Hans stood behind Friedrich, still wrapped in the blanket the young American soldier had given him. Neither of them had spoken much since the capture. What was there to say? They were alive when they should be dead, and that was strange enough. Next, an American corporal with red hair waved Friedrich forward. The man looked at Friedrich's worn uniform and thin face. Name: Friedrich Müller. Private. Serial number 4827693. The corporal wrote it down. Age: 22. Unit. Friedrich told him. The corporal did not seem to care. He was just filling out forms, doing his job like a clerk in a grocery store. This was war for Americans, Friedrich thought. Paperwork and procedures. After processing, they were loaded onto new trucks. This time the journey was longer, heading west toward the coast. The convoy moved through France, and Friedrich saw what American bombing had done. Cities reduced to broken teeth. Bridges collapsed into rivers. But he also saw American engineers rebuilding roads, American trucks bringing supplies, American soldiers directing traffic like police officers at a busy intersection. They're good at logistics, whispered Klaus, an older prisoner who had fought in World War I. He was 45 with gray in his beard and tired eyes that had seen too much. Americans don't fight with courage like Germans. They fight with trucks and factories and endless supplies. That's why we lost. Friedrich said nothing. He was too tired for politics or analysis. They reached the port city of Le Havre after 2 days. The harbor was crowded with ships, American ships with names like USS General Stewart and USS Edmund B. Alexander. These were not warships, but transport vessels, designed to carry soldiers. Now they would carry prisoners across the Atlantic. They're taking us to America, Hans said, staring at the massive ships. The realization spread through the prisoners like electricity. America, not just to an American camp in Europe, but to America itself, across the ocean, to a place none of them had ever imagined seeing. Some prisoners looked excited. America meant safety, far from Russian revenge and British bombs. Others looked terrified. America was enemy territory, unknown and strange. They boarded the ship in the evening. The hold where they would sleep was crowded, but not cruel. Bunks were stacked 3 high, and there were more men than beds, but it was better than the foxholes and trenches they had left behind. American guards stood at the exits, rifles ready, but they did not beat anyone or shout. The ship left port at dawn. Friedrich stood on the deck with dozens of other prisoners, watching Europe disappear. France, Belgium, Germany, everything he knew fading into gray mist. Some men cried. Others prayed. Hans just stared at the water. Do you think we'll ever come back? Hans asked. Friedrich did not answer because he did not know. The ocean was rough. The ship rolled and pitched through Atlantic winter storms. Most prisoners got seasick, vomiting into buckets and groaning in their bunks. Friedrich spent 3 days too sick to eat, his stomach empty and rebelling. Even Hans, who never complained, turned green and miserable. American sailors brought thin soup and crackers for the sick prisoners. It was strange to be cared for by the enemy. Friedrich kept waiting for cruelty that never came. On the fifth day, the seas calmed. Prisoners were allowed on deck in shifts for fresh air. Friedrich stood at the railing, feeling sun on his face for the first time in weeks. An American sailor stood nearby, a boy from Texas who was trying to learn German from a phrase book. Guten Tag, the sailor said carefully. How are you? Friedrich almost smiled. I am well. Thank you. They stood together in silence, the German prisoner and the American sailor, watching waves roll past. There should have been hatred between them, but Friedrich felt nothing except exhaustion. Klaus joined them at the railing. He looked at the endless water and shook his head. In the last war, I was captured by French. They treated us like dogs. Beat us, starved us, made us work until we collapsed. But I heard the Americans were different, even then. They gave prisoners real food, let them write letters home, followed the rules. What? Hans asked. Why do they follow rules when we didn't? Klaus shrugged. Maybe because they can afford to. When you're winning, you can be generous. When you're losing, you become desperate. Germany had been desperate for years now. Friedrich knew what his country had done in the East, to Jews, to Russians, to anyone Hitler called an enemy. He had heard the whispers even when no one was supposed to speak. His cousin had been in the SS and came home on leave once, drunk and haunted, talking about things Friedrich wished he could forget. We are the monsters, Friedrich thought. And these Americans are treating us like humans anyway. After 9 days at sea, someone shouted, "Land!" Prisoners rushed to the railings. There, rising from morning mist, was the New York skyline. Buildings so tall they looked impossible. The Statue of Liberty holding her torch high, welcoming the tired and poor and desperate. Friedrich stared at Lady Liberty and felt something break inside his chest. Here was a symbol of freedom, and he was arriving as a prisoner. The ship docked slowly. Prisoners were formed into lines and marched off the ship onto American soil. The dock was organized chaos, full of shouting men and moving equipment and the smell of salt water and diesel fuel. They loaded onto trains, the kind with passenger cars that Americans used for normal travel. Friedrich sat by a window as the train pulled away from the coast. They traveled south through countryside that looked untouched by war. Towns with lights and windows. Farms with crops growing. Children playing in yards, waving at the train. Hans pressed his face to the glass. It's like another world. It was another world. A world where war was something happening far away, not something destroying your home. Friedrich felt jealousy and wonder in equal measure. The train rolled on through day and night, carrying its cargo of prisoners deeper into America, toward a place called Mississippi, toward a camp that would become their home. Camp McCain appeared through the train window like a small city made of wood and wire. Guard towers stood at each corner, searchlights ready to sweep the grounds at night. But the camp did not look cruel. It looked organized and clean, with neat rows of barracks painted military green and paths marked with white stones. Friedrich stepped off the train with his legs shaking. After days of travel, solid ground felt strange. American soldiers formed them into lines, counting heads, checking names against lists. Everything was procedure and paperwork with Americans. That AN officer stood on a platform in front of the assembled prisoners. He was maybe 35, with sandy hair and tired eyes. Captain Robert Thompson, his uniform said. He began speaking in heavily accented German that made some prisoners smile despite themselves. Welcome to Camp McCain. You are prisoners of war under Geneva Convention protection. This means you will be treated fairly. You will receive food, shelter, medical care. You will work during the day and rest at night. You will follow rules. If you follow rules, you will be safe here. If you cause trouble, you will be punished, but never tortured. America does not torture prisoners. You can write letters home once per month. Letters will be read by censors. Any questions? No one asked questions. They were too shocked to speak. The tour of the camp began. An American sergeant walked them through the compound, pointing out different areas. The medical building where a doctor from Chicago treated sick prisoners. The mess hall where they would eat 3 meals every day. The recreation area with a makeshift soccer field. The barracks where they would sleep. 3 meals a day. Hans whispered. Is he lying? Klaus shook his head. Americans don't lie about food. They have too much of it. The barracks were simple wooden buildings with rows of bunk beds. Each prisoner got actual mattress and 2 blankets. Friedrich sat on his assigned bunk and pressed down on the mattress. It was thin but real, not straw or bare boards. He had not slept on a real mattress since leaving home. "This is better than our barracks in basic training," Hans said quietly. Other prisoners nodded. The German army had not pampered its soldiers. Even before the war turned desperate, accommodations had been harsh. This American prison camp was surprisingly comfortable by comparison. At 6 o'clock, a bell rang for dinner. Prisoners lined up outside the mess hall, nervous and uncertain. Most had not eaten a real meal in weeks. Friedrich's stomach hurt from emptiness. They filed inside. American soldiers served food from behind a counter, using large spoons to fill metal trays. Friedrich held out his tray and watched in disbelief as the server piled it with food. A piece of meat that might be pork, mashed potatoes with gravy, green beans from a can, white bread with actual butter, a cup of milk, a small bowl of canned peaches. Friedrich looked at his tray. His hands started shaking. This was more food than he had seen in months. In the German army, rations had been shrinking since 1943. By 1944, soldiers were eating potato soup and hard bread. Sometimes not even that. He found a seat at a long wooden table. Hans sat across from him, staring at his own full tray. Klaus sat beside them, tears already running down his weathered face. No one ate at first. 200 German prisoners sat in silence, looking at more food than they had dreamed of. An American guard walked through the mess hall. He was young, maybe 19, with a farm boy's open face. He stopped at Friedrich's table and noticed the men just staring at their food. "It's okay," the guard said in slow, simple English. Then he tried German. "Essen, eat." Friedrich picked up his fork. His hands would not stop shaking. He cut a piece of meat and put it in his mouth. The taste exploded on his tongue. Real meat, properly cooked, with seasoning and fat. He chewed slowly, afraid he might vomit from the richness. Around him, other prisoners began eating. Some ate slowly like Friedrich. Others ate fast, desperately, as if the food might disappear. Several men started crying while they ate. The Americans watched, but did not laugh or mock. They seemed to understand. Friedrich cleaned his tray completely, using bread to soak up every drop of gravy. His stomach felt strange, too full but grateful. He had forgotten what fullness felt like. After dinner, American soldiers distributed Red Cross packages. Each prisoner received a cardboard box with their name written on it. Friedrich carried his box back to the barracks like it was made of gold. He sat on his bunk and opened the box carefully. Inside were treasures: a bar of soap that smelled like flowers, a razor and shaving cream, a small towel, a toothbrush and toothpaste, writing paper and a pencil. And there, at the bottom, wrapped in paper, one Hershey's chocolate bar and one small jar of peanut butter. Friedrich had heard of chocolate. Before the war, his mother sometimes bought chocolate from the expensive shop in Hamburg. But peanut butter? He had never seen such a thing. He unscrewed the lid and sniffed. It smelled strange, nutty, and thick. Hans opened his package on the bunk below. He held up his chocolate bar and examined it carefully. "What is peanut butter?" he asked. Klaus, sitting on the next bunk, laughed softly. "Americans are crazy about it. It's made from peanuts, ground into paste. You spread it on bread. In the last war, they gave it to us too. It tastes unusual but good." Friedrich screwed the lid back onto his jar of peanut butter. He wrapped his chocolate bar back in its paper. These were too precious to eat tonight. He needed to save them, to have something to look forward to. Around him, other prisoners examined their packages with wonder. Some men cried holding bars of soap. Others pressed the writing paper to their faces, thinking of letters they would write to families they might never see again. The lights in the barracks dimmed at 9 o'clock. Friedrich lay in his bunk, feeling the mattress beneath him, the blanket above him, his stomach full for the first time in memory. Hans was quiet in the bunk below. "Friedrich," Hans whispered in the darkness. "Yes, why are they being so kind to us?" Friedrich had been asking himself the same question. He thought about the propaganda he had been taught. Americans were monsters. Jews controlled them. They would torture and kill German prisoners. But none of it was true. The Americans were just men doing their jobs, following rules, showing basic human decency. "I don't know," Friedrich finally answered. "But I'm grateful we're here instead of in Russia." Everyone knew what happened to German prisoners in Russian camps. Very few came back, and those who did were broken shadows. The Eastern Front was hell, and Russian revenge was worse. Friedrich closed his eyes and tried to sleep. In his pocket, The Hershey's bar pressed against his chest. Tomorrow he would taste it. Tonight he would just know it was there. Proof that somewhere in this terrible world, kindness still existed. 3 weeks passed at Camp McCain. Friedrich fell into the routine like falling into water. Wake at 6 to the morning bell. Breakfast of eggs and toast and coffee. Work detail until lunch. More work in the afternoon. Dinner at 6. Free time until lights out at 9. The work was not cruel. Some prisoners worked on the camp farm, planting vegetables and tending chickens. Others did construction, building new barracks or repairing roads. Friedrich's detail was maintenance, painting fences and fixing broken windows. The Americans paid them 10 cents per day in camp currency that could buy cigarettes or candy at the camp store. Friedrich's body began to change. His ribs stopped showing through his skin. His face filled out. His hands stopped shaking all the time. He was gaining weight on American food, becoming human again instead of a walking skeleton. But his mind was not healing so easily. At night, he dreamed of the Ardennes forest. He dreamed of friends who had died. He dreamed of his mother's face and wondered if she was still alive. British bombers were destroying German cities every night. The Americans bombed during the day. Hamburg was probably gone by now, turned to ash like Berlin and Dresden and Cologne. The mail call came every Tuesday. An American corporal would stand in the camp yard reading names from letters that had made it through the censors. Most prisoners never heard their names. Mail from Germany was rare and slow. When someone did get a letter, everyone would gather around to share the news. On a Tuesday in early February, the corporal called Hans's name. Hans ran forward like a child on Christmas morning. He took the letter with shaking hands and walked away to read it privately. Friedrich watched his friend go and felt hope. Maybe Hans's mother had news. Maybe his sister was okay. 10 minutes later, Hans came back. His face was empty of all expression. He walked to his bunk and sat down without speaking. Friedrich sat beside him. What did it say? Hans handed him the letter. It was from Hans's mother, written in pencil on paper torn from a notebook. The handwriting was shaky and hard to read. Friedrich read it slowly. Hans's little sister was dead, killed in a bombing raid on Berlin in December. She was 14 years old. The building collapsed while she was inside helping neighbors in the basement shelter. Her body was found 3 days later. Friedrich folded the letter carefully and gave it back. He did not know what to say. There were no good words for this kind of news. Hans lay down on his bunk and turned to face the wall. Other prisoners saw what happened and left him alone. Everyone in the barracks had lost someone. Everyone carried grief like a heavy coat they could not take off. That evening, Friedrich decided to finally eat his chocolate bar. He had been saving it for 3 weeks, looking at it every night, touching the wrapper. Now seemed like the right time. Hans needed comfort, and Friedrich needed to do something. Anything. He sat on his bunk and unwrapped the Hershey's bar slowly. The brown chocolate gleamed in the electric light. The smell rose up, sweet and rich and impossible. Friedrich had forgotten that anything could smell this good. He broke off one square and put it in his mouth. The taste hit him like a physical force. Sweetness exploded on his tongue, chocolate melting and coating his mouth with flavor he had not experienced in years. It was not just chocolate. It was his mother's birthday cake. It was Christmas morning before the war. It was sitting with Maria in the park, eating ice cream and planning their future together. Tears started falling before Friedrich could stop them. They came from somewhere deep and broken inside him, pouring out like water from a cracked dam. He could not stop crying. He covered his face with his hands, but the tears kept coming. Hans heard the sound and turned over. He saw Friedrich crying and sat up. Friedrich offered him half of the chocolate bar without speaking. Hans took it. He bit into the chocolate and froze. His face crumpled like paper. He started crying too, hard sobs that shook his whole body. Klaus, on the next bunk, watched them. He reached under his mattress and pulled out his jar of peanut butter. He had been saving it too, waiting for the right moment. He opened the lid and used his finger to scoop out a blob of the brown paste. He spread it on a piece of bread from dinner, making a sandwich. He took one bite and stopped chewing. His tears came quietly, running down his weathered face into his gray beard. The crying spread through the barracks like a contagion. One prisoner after another opened their Red Cross packages. They unwrapped chocolate bars and opened peanut butter jars. They took bites and the tears came. It was not just the taste of food. It was everything. The kindness of strangers who should have been enemies. The full bellies after years of hunger. The safety after years of fear. The guilt of being alive when so many were dead. The shame of what Germany had done. The grief of homes destroyed and families scattered. The overwhelming relief of surviving. They cried for all of it at once. Captain Thompson walked through the barracks on his evening inspection. He stopped in the doorway and saw 200 German prisoners sitting on their bunks, eating chocolate and peanut butter, crying like children. The captain stood there for a long moment. His face was unreadable. Then he quietly turned and walked away, leaving them to their grief. Friedrich finished his chocolate bar slowly, making each square last. Hans sat beside him, both of them silent now, emptied of tears. The chocolate was gone, but the taste remained, coating Friedrich's mouth with impossible sweetness. "We don't deserve this kindness," Hans whispered. Friedrich thought about that. Did they deserve kindness? They had fought for Hitler. They had worn the uniform of an army that had done terrible things. Some of them had done terrible things themselves. Friedrich had never shot civilians or burned villages, but he had looked the other way when others did. He had followed orders and kept his mouth shut. "Maybe that's exactly why they give it," Friedrich said, echoing something Klaus had said weeks ago. "Because we don't deserve it. Because kindness is not about what you deserve. It's about staying human when the world tries to make you into a monster." Hans looked at him with red eyes. "Do you think God will forgive us?" Friedrich did not know if he believed in God anymore. But he believed in this moment. In this strange American prison camp where enemies fed each other and followed rules and treated prisoners like human beings instead of animals. "I think we have to forgive ourselves first," Friedrich said. "And that will be harder than any punishment." They sat together as night fell outside and the barracks grew quiet. Around them, other prisoners settled into sleep, their stomachs full and their faces wet with tears. The taste of chocolate and peanut butter lingered in the air, sweet and strange, a reminder that even in the darkest times, unexpected mercy could appear. Spring came to Mississippi like a gentle invasion. The harsh winter cold faded into warmth. Trees around Camp McCain grew green leaves. Flowers bloomed along the fence line. The world was coming alive again. Even as the war continued to grind Europe into dust, Friedrich sat at a wooden table in the recreation area, writing a letter to his mother. He did not know if she would ever receive it. He did not even know if she was alive. But the Americans allowed letters once per month, and Friedrich wrote them faithfully, sending words into the void and hoping they would find their target. "Dear Mother," he wrote in careful handwriting, "I am safe in America. The camp is clean, and we are treated well. We receive 3 meals every day. I have gained weight, and my health is good. Please write if you can. I think of you every day and pray you are safe." He paused, pen hovering over paper. Should he tell her about the chocolate? Would she believe him? It sounded like propaganda, like a lie. German prisoners treated well by Americans, fed chocolate and peanut butter, given real beds and medical care. The truth sounded too good to be true that he wrote it anyway. "They give us chocolate, Mother. Real chocolate like before the war. It tastes like your birthday cakes. It tastes like home." Hans walked over and sat across from Friedrich. He looked better now. The news of his sister's death had broken something in him, but time was slowly piecing him back together. He had started helping in the camp hospital, working alongside American medics who were teaching him basic medical skills. "Captain Thompson wants volunteers for a sports match," Hans said. "Germans versus Americans. Football." Friedrich looked up. "Soccer. They call it soccer here. But yes, football to us." Hans smiled slightly. "I told him you played in school." Friedrich had played striker for his school team in Hamburg years ago in a different life. He had been fast and skilled, scoring goals and hearing crowds cheer. That boy seemed like a stranger now. "I'm out of practice," Friedrich said. "We're all out of practice. But Klaus says it will be good for morale. The Americans are organizing it as a gesture of goodwill." The match happened on a Saturday afternoon. Prisoners and guards gathered around the makeshift soccer field. Someone had painted white lines with lime powder and set up goals made from wooden posts and rope. Captain Thompson acted as referee, with a whistle and a serious expression. The American team was mostly young soldiers from the guard company. They played with enthusiasm but limited skill. The German team had several former athletes, including Friedrich and a man from Munich who had played professionally before the war. Friedrich ran onto the field and felt something wake up inside him. For 90 minutes, he was not a prisoner or a soldier. He was just a young man playing football, chasing a ball across grass, working with teammates, feeling his body move with purpose and joy. The Germans won 4-2. The Americans cheered anyway, shaking hands and clapping backs. Captain Thompson gave both teams bottles of Coca-Cola, something Friedrich had only heard about in movies. The sweet, fizzy drink was strange but delicious. "Good game," said Private James, the young guard from Iowa. He spoke in slow English, and Friedrich responded with the few English words he had learned. "Thank you. Good game also." They sat together on the grass, drinking Coca-Cola, enemy soldiers becoming something like friends. Private James pulled out photos from his wallet. "My grandfather," he said, pointing to an old man in the picture. "From Germany. Hamburg. Come to America 1890. Friedrich stared at the photo. This American soldier's grandfather was from Hamburg, Friedrich's home city. They were connected by blood and history, separated by war and politics. "Small world," Friedrich said in careful English. "Small world." James agreed. As spring turned towards summer, news from Europe grew worse for Germany, but better for the world. The Russian army was pushing toward Berlin. The Americans and British were deep into Germany from the west. Everyone knew the end was coming. On May 7, 1945, Captain Thompson gathered all prisoners in the main yard. His face was serious, but not cruel. "The war in Europe is over," he announced in German. "Germany has surrendered unconditionally. The fighting is finished." Silence fell over the prisoners. Some men cheered. Others cried. Most just stood in shock, not knowing how to feel. The war was over. Germany had lost. Everything they had fought for was gone. Friedrich felt nothing at first, then everything at once. Relief that no more soldiers would die. Grief for his destroyed country. Fear for what came next. Hope that maybe, somehow, he could go home. "What happens to us?" someone shouted. "You will remain here until repatriation is organized," Captain Thompson said. "Germany must be stabilized first. It will take time. Months, maybe longer. But you will go home eventually." That evening, Friedrich and Hans sat outside their barracks as the sun set. The Mississippi air was warm and humid, so different from German weather. Crickets sang in the grass. Somewhere a radio played American music. "What will we do when we go back?" Hans asked. Friedrich thought about Hamburg. Was anything left of it? Would his mother's house still be standing? Would Maria have waited for him? Or would she have moved on, married someone else, started a new life? "We rebuild," Friedrich said. "We make sure this never happens again." Private James walked past on patrol duty. He stopped and offered them cigarettes. They sat together in comfortable silence. The three young men who should have been enemies but had somehow become something else. Another Red Cross package arrived the next week. More chocolate, more peanut butter. This time Friedrich did not save his chocolate bar. He broke it into pieces and shared it with Hans, Klaus, and several other prisoners. They sat together eating chocolate, talking about home and hope and the future. Private James walked by and Friedrich offered him a piece. The American guard smiled and took it. "Thank you," James said in German. "Thank you," Friedrich replied in English. They understood each other perfectly. Friedrich spread peanut butter on bread that evening and ate it slowly, savoring the strange, nutty taste that he had grown to love. It was his favorite American food now, this weird paste made from peanuts that Germans had never eaten before the war. As he ate, he thought about everything. The chocolate and peanut butter were not just food. They were symbols of something larger. Proof that enemies could show mercy. Proof that humanity survived even in war's aftermath. Proof that rules and kindness and decency still mattered when the world tried to say they didn't. Hans sat beside him with his own peanut butter sandwich. They ate together as the sun set over Mississippi. Two German soldiers turned prisoners, turned something new. They were no longer fighting. They were no longer starving. They were no longer certain they would die. They were just young men eating sandwiches, waiting to go home, hoping to build something better from the ashes of what had been destroyed. "You know what I think?" Friedrich said quietly. "What?" "I think this is what peace tastes like." Hans smiled, really smiled for the first time since the letter about his sister. "Like peanut butter." Exactly like peanut butter. Strange and unexpected and surprisingly good. They finished their sandwiches as night fell and the stars came out. Somewhere across the ocean, Germany was being rebuilt. Someday they would be part of that rebuilding. But for now, they were here, safe and fed, learning what it meant to be human again after years of being soldiers. The taste of peanut butter lingered on Friedrich's tongue, sweet, and strange. A reminder that even the darkest times eventually give way to light.